Hey folks, welcome to Dad's Den. Today we're talking books, we're talking sci-fi, we're talking Poul Anderson. We're talking The Rebel Worlds, a novel in the Flandry series that he wrote about an ensign, although in this he is risen in rank. Published in 1969. Now this is the first of these books of this series that I have read. So he was a new character to me, but as soon as I read the name, I went, "Oh, I've heard of this Ensign Flandry. I've heard of this character before." So it was nice. It was a nice introduction to the character. The story is set in a vast human empire in space, a Terran Empire ruled from Earth. It has a feel not unlike pre First World War Europe in its tone. There is an emperor, Josip. There is, or maybe it would be pronounced Josip. There is a vast bureaucracy. There is a space navy, etc. Governors on worlds. It doesn't veer too far into space opera. It does try to give a sense of reality to these starships, and to the humans and the non-humans that crew them. But it is obviously science fiction, so I wouldn't say it's very strictly realistic. But I think it's a believable world, so to speak, a believable situation. And Poul Anderson has always struck me as being very good at balancing the grand with the personal. And in this book, we get this because it details a rebellion by an admiral in this space navy against the emperor. And so there is that grand political game that's being played, grand military strategy, but we also get to the tactical level, we get to the ship-to-ship level, and most importantly, we get to the human level. Well, let's get into the story a little bit, and I'll keep this, generally speaking, spoiler-free. There is a governor on a world in the Alpha Crucis system. And he is rather a wicked man, but he is a favorite of the emperor. He's very cunning, very decadent, quite evil, but he has wormed his way into the emperor's heart. And he undertakes to arrest this admiral and his wife. The admiral ultimately is freed by his men, but his wife remains a captive. And so this man, Hugh McCormac, this admiral, decides that he cannot abide by such evil within the empire. The fact that the emperor will do nothing about it, and in fact allows it, promotes it even, it's time for a change. He's a very hard man. He's an old veteran, but perhaps he lacks a certain amount of imagination. Perhaps he's a little naive. So into this comes Flandry, who's part of you can kind of call it the Secret Service, although he is the military Secret Service. He's brought in to deal with the situation. He's given a ship and a brevet command, and sent off to find out what's going on and gather information, and is there a way to get this under control, because the human empire is threatened from other sides by other forces. It can't afford to put a massive fleet against this rebellion for a long period of time. So what can he do? Well, Flandry is a very creative thinker. He is loyal to the Empire, but he's also loyal to himself. He's not exactly a scoundrel, but he's maybe got a little scoundrel in him. So he decides he's gonna take a tack that most people wouldn't think of. And the first thing he does when he gets there is he stages a raid on the prison and frees the Admiral's wife, Catherine. And he escapes with her. And this gives him maybe a bargaining chip, maybe an insight into McCormac and what he's up to. And in the course of this, heading into the home system of the rebellion, his ship is attacked by some mercenaries employed by McCormac. Some, folks out from outside the Empire. And it's a successful attack. His ship, they have to escape the ship in like a kind of an escape potty thing. Or no, maybe it was the actual ship that goes down. At any rate, they ride it down to this planet, Dido. Sort of a tropical world. It's a world that Catherine knows very well, since she's a scientist, a researcher, and had done work on this planet. And so we kind of funnel down from this grand scheme down to this, like I said, strategic level, tactical. And once we get onto the planet, the personal level, McCormac finds himself attracted to Catherine. And even though he's trying to get his crew away from the shipwreck, because they know the mercenaries are going to come back and eliminate it, he also has to figure out what to do on this planet. He's got to get to safety. He's going to need her, but he doesn't maybe completely trust her, and doesn't know exactly what he's going to do. So it becomes a very personal thing for McCormac. Another feature of the book are the native Didonians, a very interesting alien species, quite alien to human beings. The book, in fact, opens in the words of these aliens, and it is, just from a normal human perspective, very difficult to understand. I didn't know quite what I was reading. It wasn't so bad that I wanted to put the book down, but I was like, what is this exactly? I mean, it's in English, but it's from a very interesting perspective. The book ends in the same words. And what's really interesting is it's now very understandable. So over the course of the book, as you get to know these aliens, these Didonians, they become much more intelligible to you. I think that's a really nice feature of it. Again, it's not a really thick book. It's not a long read. Now, I'm not going to get into all the action and what exactly happens and how Flandry does what Flandry does. I'll leave that to you. But I do want to read a brief bit it's in chapter 8, after their ship has been attacked and severely damaged. And it really gripped me. I really liked the way it was written. And so I'll use that as sort of a sample of the writing you can expect in this book. So, like I said, beginning of chapter 8. They've been attacked. They're now looking at the lifeboats. No boat remained spaceworthy. Where destruction was not total, crucial systems had been knocked out. Time was lacking to make repairs or cannibalize. One of the 4 craft offered a weak hope. Though its fusion generator was inoperative, its accumulators could energize the 2 drive cones that seemed usable, and the instruments and controls were undamaged. An aerodynamic landing might be possible. Every rated pilot was killed or wounded, but Flandry had flown combat aircraft before he transferred to the Intelligence Corps. The engineers had barely finished ascertaining this much when it became urgent to abandon ship. They would soon strike atmosphere. That would complete the ruin of the hull. Struggling through airlessness, weightlessness, lightlessness, Hale survivors dragged hurt to the boat housing. There wasn't room for all those bodies if they stayed space-armored. Flandry pressurized from tanks and, as each man cycled through the airlock, had his bulky gear stripped off and sent out the disposal valve. He managed to find stowage for 3 suits, including his, which he suddenly remembered he must not wear when everyone else would be unprotected. That was more for the sake of the impellers secured to them than for anything else. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. A shudder went through boat and bones, the first impact on Dido's stratosphere. Flandry shot free. The rest was indescribable, riding a meteorite through incandescence, shock, thunderblasts, storm wind, night, mountains, and caverns of cloud, rain like bullets, crazy tilting and whirling of horribly onrushing horizon, while the noise roared and battered and vibrations shook brains and skulls, and devils danced on the instrument panel. Somehow Flandry and Havelock kept a measure of control. They braked the worst of their velocity before they got down to altitudes where it would be fatal. They did not skip helplessly off the tropopause, nor flip and tumble when they crossed high winds in the lower atmosphere. They avoided peaks that raked up to catch them in a monstrous hurricane, violent beyond anything Terra had ever known, that would have sundered their boat and cast it into the sea. Amidst the straining over meters and displays, the frantic leap of hands over pilot board and feet on pedals, the incessant brutality of sound, heat throbbing, they clung to awareness of their location. So that's part of the ship's descent. Their little lifeboat, its descent through the atmosphere to crash land on Dido. Very visceral. I won't call this a perfect book, but it's very good. There are maybe a few parts that involve Flandry taking rather large risks, and they pay off, but that's what books are for, honestly. And in the end, Flandry pays quite dearly for what he achieves. It's not a happy ending, but it's not exactly a sad ending either. But ultimately, it is tragic, and it is well worth a read. I'm now going to go seek out the other Flandry books that Anderson wrote, based upon the strength of this. So if you're looking for a good sci-fi novel, I highly suggest The Rebel Worlds by Poul Anderson, and maybe you want to start with some of the earlier Flandry books first. And this image on the cover, as odd as it looks, is definitely important to the story. So if you have read this book and would like to leave some comments, try to avoid spoilers if you can. I like to hopefully put stuff out there for people to read rather than sort of spoiling it for them. But yeah, please leave some comments. If you're a big fan of Anderson, I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another, and try to have some fun out there. And I will see you next time around in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.